some of the people that have more power to drive sales are actually have a very small following. And it's all about the fact that they have a very engaged and niche audience.
Hi, before we get to this week's podcast, I'd like to tell you that Automated Creative are releasing a book called How to Make It in Marketing, Volume 1. It is a collection of the best marketing career advice we've had from over 200 episodes of the Shiny New Object podcast. You'll hear from some of the biggest, brightest and best names in the industry telling you how to grow your career. You can reserve yourself a copy at this URL. So get your pens out. It's bit.ly, so bit.ly/make it in marketing. So that's bit.ly, bit.ly/make it in marketing. But the make it in marketing bit is in capital letters. So bit.ly/lowercase and the rest is make it in marketing uppercase. I think you should get your heads around that. And enjoy. It's a great read. Hello and welcome to the Shiny New Object podcast. My name is Tom Ollerton. I'm the founder of Automated Creative, and this is a weekly podcast where I get to interview someone from the industry who is inspiring, intelligent, informed, and has some great experience. And this week is no different. I'm on a call with Lucrèce Sicat, who is head of creator marketing at Amazon Europe. Lucrèce, apologies about your pronunciation. I've done my best, but anyone who doesn't know who you are and what you do, can you tell them how to pronounce your name, but also how you got to where you've got to today?
Hi, Tom. Thank you for having me. My name is Lucrèce Sicat. I'm the head of creator marketing for Amazon in Europe for their associate program. I've been working for the past 10 years across, agencies and brands, and now I'm within Amazon. I studied before literature and then marketing. And I'm sure, as you can tell from my accent, I'm actually French, but I've been based in the UK for over 10 years now.
Fantastic. So a lovely range of different places to work, and congrats on the role at Amazon. But I'm guessing you broke a few eggs on the way there. What is that work fuck up that you hated yourself for making, but actually, in retrospect, you're glad you did?
Yes. I think my biggest work fuck up was taking a position actually I wasn't passionate about. It also ended up being my, I think, biggest learning. But that's also how I learned what I love. So to give you a bit more background, my first job was at Edelman in Paris, where I was a junior consultant within the new business development team. And so I was working with, brands on launching products or rebranding. And after a few months, I started working with L'Oréal on the Cannes Film Festival. And I think that's where I really got kind of like a step or a foot into the industry of content creators and working with celebrities and influencers. And after this position, I actually decided to move to London to continue, my studies, and I did a master there. And after that, joined a company called Like to Know It, which is a kind of like a global technology platforms that connects brands and content creators. So I was there on the brand side, working with brands to really streamline and align their strategy across all the departments, managing accounts as well, doing some campaigns with influencers, whether it was for ROI, traffic, brand awareness, new customer acquisition, you name it. And after a few years at Rewardstyle, it was time for me to make a change. And I remember at the time I was applying for several brand marketing positions, but I actually ended up being hired for a position in a logistic department. So it was still new business development. So I really felt it was, at the time close to my expertise, although it was a different industry. And I think that's where I realized it was really the wrong choice for me. I think all I could think of was, developing new marketing concepts and doing new campaigns. And that was not my job at all. So something was really missing. And I think I was really unhappy. And the thing is, I've always been very passionate about my work, but I could see the passion wasn't there anymore. So I knew I had to make a change quite quickly. And luckily, I found a position within the same company heading up the social media and influencer team for Amazon Fashion, actually. And I really found my creativity back, working on still developing the business, but that also led me to my current position. And I think the fun fact on this is that I remember when I was 15 years old, I didn't know what to do with my life, like most teenagers. And my mom actually brought me to see a family friend who was working in advertising at the time. And I remember telling him that I wanted to do something creative, but I wasn't an artist. I wanted to do something also business related, but I didn't want to work in kind of like sales or being a lawyer. And at that time, I think we didn't really talk about marketing in school. And this person looked at me and started to tell me about the fact that each morning he would take a different word to work, and his wife would be very annoyed. And essentially his advice based on that story, which was very strange to me at the time, was, sometimes in life, in order to find who you are, you need to get lost. So of course, at the time, I didn't get what he was trying to say. And I was even more lost after this. So it actually took me like a decade to understand, what he really meant. But actually it was so right. For me, it meant that choosing the wrong job allowed me to understand what I really wanted and where my expertise and passion lied. I was actually lucky to work within Amazon at this time because they allowed me to change from one job to another. But yeah, it was biggest fuck up, but biggest learning.
I love how an agency guy dropped a whole load of agency BS on a 15-year-old and they didn't get it for 10 years.
It took me a while.
There's another truth in there somewhere, isn't there?
Exactly.
So,
or too creative for me, maybe.
So thanks for being so honest about that. But I'm also keen to know, what is your top marketing tip? What is that bit of advice that you find yourself sharing most often that has stood you in good stead?
I think it's a hard one, actually. It seems super simple, but it's a hard one because I do receive a lot of advice. But I think in my day-to-day job, there are two tips that are really helping me, scale the impact of my campaigns. I think the first one is really about automation. I think marketing overall is a broad topic, but whether you're working on acquisition, like engagement, growth, all three, I think you really need to ensure that you have the right automation process and the right tracking and reporting, of course, but especially if you're operating across several countries. So typically an example of that would be, in one of my roles, I was sending some emails to new creators who joined an affiliate program to educate them. And then I was, at some point I realized, great, like if I'm sending the email in May, all the creators that have joined before that will receive it. But what about the creators that are joining, in June? And so I started working typically on semi-automated email series that would be automated, or like that, the creators will receive after 2 days, 15 days, 30 days after joining the program. And so that's, a typical example of how you can really find ways to be more efficient, to scale across different countries. In my current, role, I'm looking at 10 different marketplaces, but also being more efficient so that you can focus on kind of like other projects as well. And of course, making sure that you have the data to analyze, how well this is performing. And the second one, it's a very Amazonian one, but it really changed my way of working. It's to move away from PowerPoint or Keynote or whatever you're using and start writing documents instead. So I think it's super easy. We've been, used on using PowerPoints whenever we want to create a new project, and it's very visual. And don't get me wrong, I'm still using it sometimes, but I think it's also very distracting from the information that you're trying to share with your audience. On the other hand, when you're writing a document, you have a way to organize a bit more your thoughts and kind of like convey your messaging in a more structured manner. So I think it gives a bit more clarity to the audience. And I mean, believe me, it's way harder to put a strategy in a one-page document because you need to write down, your objectives, why you're doing this, how you're going to achieve it. But I think it also allows more kind of like exploration of, your ideas, your concepts, but also you can include any kind of like evidence and research. So yeah, I think writing a doc versus a PowerPoint really allows you to stay focused on your message, but ensure that your ideas are communicated clearly and effectively.
So tell me more about that. No one's talked about this in the podcast. I'm fascinated. And I've heard whispers about this kind of stuff at Amazon. So give me an example of when you would write a document and how you go about that, how long it is, how long does it take you, how is it critiqued? Because obviously PowerPoint is the kind of school uniform of advertising, isn't it? So I'm interested to learn a different way of working.
It is. So every time I would start a new project, I would actually start by writing a document. And it doesn't need, I think the best documents are not the ones that are, 15-page long. Because again, I think it is harder to, to write a 1-pager or a 3-pager. And the idea is really to focus on kind of like remove all the objective or subjective, because typically if you're saying it's going to have a high impact, it can mean different things for different people, right? So instead of using big impact or high impact, actually try in your doc to put a number next to it. And it's way harder than it looks, but at least it really allows you to stay focused on, okay, what is a big impact? What number am I talking about? And how am I going to track this as well? So whenever we're starting a project, we always write this doc. There might be, several people as well supporting the doc from your team or from, external teams. And then I think seeking some feedback from other teams as well on your project is where having a work doc is really helpful, because it can tell you that, maybe your data are wrong, or maybe, there is a way to automate typically the project that you're talking about, or a new tool that, could allow you to do that, basically to reduce the timeline. So I think it's a way for us to connect all together, but also when you're talking about a postmortem, so like how well did your campaign perform, right? It's easier to then go back to your doc and then see everything that you set up and look at what are the learnings in terms of, because you would have to, put together what the processes looks like, etc. So it's really easy once you have your work doc for the project to then tie your postmortem and see what needs to be changed. But of course, having a work doc means that it's not just for you, it's also a good way to share it. And I think just to add on that, if you're sharing a PowerPoint sometimes with, people that have no clue what you're doing, it can be very hard for them to understand what you're talking about, where you're going. And that's how you should structure your Word doc, to make sure that whoever is reading it, they can really understand it.
Is there a specific structure or template?
Everyone has their own, but definitely overview. What are you trying to achieve? What are your objectives? What are you going to track? And then we always go back to the customer first. So like everything, in the project overview, it's always about how is it going to benefit, your end goal is to benefit the customer. So how is it going to benefit your customers?
Okay, look, this isn't what we were planning to talk about, but thank you. It's been a real treat. And often on this podcast, someone says something, my brain's going, right, how do I do that? Thank you for indulging me. And anyone listening to this, I apologize for steering the ship in the wrong direction a bit, but hopefully that was of interest. This episode of the Shiny New Object podcast is brought to you in partnership with MadFest. Whether it's live in London or streamed online to the global marketing community, you can always expect a distinctive and daring blend of fast-paced content, startup innovation pitches, and unconventional entertainment from MadFest events. You'll find me causing trouble on stage, recording live versions of this podcast, and sharing a beer with the nicest and most influential people in marketing. Check it out at www.madfestlondon.com. So, shiny new object time. Your shiny new object, Lucrèce, is creator commerce. So anyone who's been around in marketing a while could probably guess what that means, but I want you to be specific. What is creator commerce, and why should the people listening to this podcast believe it could be their shiny new object?
So creator commerce is all about content creators. So content creators, they basically have a strong following on social media or, any publication online as well, that really trust their opinion. So they essentially create curated products recommendation and their content drive either like awareness, brand loyalty, can alter shopping habits. So it's supporting both, creator commerce is supporting both, performance-based and brand-based campaigns. And I think what I'm really passionate about is the impact of, creator commerce and those new voices that are emerging every day via so many different channels that I believe are really forcing ourselves as marketers to a marketing rethink. I think the reason why it's interesting from a marketing perspective is that they really represent a shift in the traditional approach to commerce. So, I mean, our generation, we've kind of like grown up with, the first content creators. We were used to calling them bloggers. Now some of them are calling them influencers, but we also realize that publishers are also using kind of like links on social media to make their audience purchase. And I think before, we were seeing like brands and retailers that were selling their products directly to the customers, and we're shifting to a model where individual content creators, however you want to call them, influencers, they're really empowered to create now and sell, like curate almost what they choose to promote directly to their audience. So from a marketing perspective, it means that we need to adapt kind of like our strategies, and we need to adapt in creating a more kind of like authentic and personalized approach to reaching customers across new platform and new channels. And I think this happens in three different ways mainly, but there are so many things that we're learning every day. But I think the first big takeaway is how to communicate, with your audience as a marketer, being authentic. So content creators, they're often, for example, celebrated for their authentic voice, right? Like they have a unique perspective. You follow a creator because you relate to this person, you're inspired, and so you're interested in their point of view. And so it really resonates, with consumers there who are increasingly looking for content that is actually genuine and relatable. And I'm not saying that. The data are saying that, if you look at how much is expected the creator commerce industry to grow. And so it means that really brands, they are rethinking their marketing strategies to incorporate more authentic storytelling, but also partnering with influencers or publishers that have a genuine interest for their products. I think it's also crucial, to ensure kind of like long-term success of a collaboration in general. But also, I think the second point is that it also raises the question about personalization, right? And niche audiences. With content creators, we've seen that they're skilled at engaging with their audience on a more personal level. They're actually creating a sense of community. They're engaging with them. They're interacting with them. And so their followers are actually very loyal to their brand as people. And they're really passionate about what they talk about. That's why everyone is looking at engagement rate, right? Like how much consumers or followers are engaging with the content that the content creator is posting online. And so I think as a marketer, again, it means that we need to think a bit more about how we can personalize the messaging and engage with customers on a more one-to-one level. So for example, using technology to, target certain cohorts of customers with a certain messaging, rather than, I think, a more one size, fits all messaging or campaign, so broader campaign.
Right. So sorry, just to have to pause you there. So go back. So explain how that works, right? So someone who's new to this might be saying, okay, you get a creator to work with a brand in an authentic way and they create a video or some content and everyone sees it. But what you're saying is, no, you need to personalize. You need to have a different message for each audience or a different message for each person. And tell me a bit more about how that works and how you'd actually deliver that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's super. It all starts with the data. Because whenever you're working with a content creator, you need to understand who the audience is, what are their interests. And in order to do that, either you're working with an affiliate platform where you can see the data, or you can use a lot of third-party tools that enable you to see to have a bit more data on the followers of a specific content creators. Because, for example, if you're fashion brands, high-end fashion brand. You want to make sure that you're working with the right influencer, for example, that has this niche audience to talk to your customers. So it all really starts with the data in order to understand who to work with. And then I think the beauty of content creator is that usually the campaigns that performs best is the one that are using this data first and then giving the freedom to the content creator to write, what they need to write about. So not necessarily being very prescriptive, because at the end of the day, you're working with a creator because you want to reach their audience, and they know better their audience because they're interacting on a daily basis with them. So I would say, when you share a brief with a content creator, leave them kind of like the freedom of creating what they know will resonate with their audience. And then when they are using affiliate links to like track links, basically on stories, on their YouTube, on any kind of platform, you can actually track the success of your campaign. So you can see how many people clicked on the link, how many people purchased the product, etc. And so what I'm saying in like being more personalized and reaching out new audience is that it's not necessarily working with the biggest influencers who have, 1 million followers plus 5 million, whatever you want. It's really looking at making sure you're working with the right person for your right messaging that will convey that to their niche audience. And actually, when I look at data, I can see that. So, and I know it's always surprising for a lot of brands, but some of the top converters, as in some of the people that have more power to drive sales, are actually have a very small following. And it's all about the fact that they have a very engaged and niche audience.
Yeah, that's interesting. And with our work at Automated Creative, one of the things that we've noticed across many of our brands, many of our categories, is that influencers can be great for driving consideration. So I am a person who is influenced by Lucrèce, for example. And you say, I like this product, you should go and check it out. And I go, because I like you, I will go and look at it. So I will consider it.
Yeah.
But that won't necessarily make me convert.
And I think that's all about the data that you're looking at first, right? Like, because I think creator commerce is all about this. You have so many types of what people call influencers. You have celebrities, you have, kind of like trendsetters, but you also have e-commerce influencers that are creating this habit. And it's, there is a lot of work behind as well, because they need to create the habits, of, their followers clicking on the products, knowing where to find the right products. And I think now, because there are so many new tools and new platforms that are emerging, it's easier for them to actually create the link and, make sure that they're adding that on a daily basis, on a regular basis to their content as well. But that's also a lot of education, us, educating influencers and creators, but also the creators educating their audience. And I'm sure if you follow someone, I'm sure you follow a lot of people on Instagram or TikTok or Twitch, Tom.
Of course, yeah.
If you know where to find the products, then it increases the conversion rate as well, because you might have seen something, on the contents from a specific content creator like a month ago, and you didn't buy it, but then you remember it, you want to find it back. And so having these links, make sure that actually if you want to purchase it after 3 weeks, you'll be able to find it.
So what's the best way to get started with creator commerce from a brand perspective? So maybe there's some brands listening to this who have thought, well, we should probably be doing this, but don't really know how. What are the first 3 things you should do to set you up for success?
I think the first one will be make sure that you're putting in place some tracking, because if you don't have the tracking, it's going to be hard for you to, actually see what the success of the campaign is. So whether you're already working with an affiliate marketing platform or you're setting up your own tracking, some brands are doing it in-house and they're, setting up their tracking manually. Or you're working with any other platform, I think that's the first starting point, because from there you will be able to access any data that you need to. The second one is whenever you're looking at creating a campaign, again, whether it's with influencers or publishers, so any publication as well, I think it's really about making sure that you're very clear on your objectives. So a lot of time, I've seen so many brands coming to me and saying, I want to do a campaign because I want to raise the awareness, but I also want to kind of like change the brand positioning, but I also want to drive sales and traffic. And I think it's super important to kind of like define your objective and being a bit more mindful about your objective. What is your primary objective? If your primary objective is to drive sales, then you need to look at creators that are driving sales for your competitors, for example. If your primary objective is brand awareness, then follower number might be important for you, and then the engagement rate of a specific content creator. But all of this to say that it changes a lot how how the impact and the success of your campaign. And then the third one, I think, is really about understanding what came out of the collaboration. So often as well, brands are working with content creators, it's generating impressions, but they're not necessarily deep diving into how was it, perceived from an audience perspective. And so, again, if you have an affiliation platform, if you have this data, then you can understand a bit more your audience based on that, and then continue to test and evolve. But, having I think it's important to have a very clear and honest conversation as well about influencers or content creators, publications as well. And being very clear on what your expectations are, because at the end of the day, it's a collaboration, it's a partnership, it's a win-win. If this is successful, it's a win-win for everyone. So I think it all starts with, after being set up on the right tool, it all starts with having a brief that is very clear.
Well, unfortunately, we're over time here, and that's my fault for asking too many questions before. But if someone wants to carry on talking to you about creator commerce, where is the best place to get in touch with you, and what makes the best message to you that gets you to reply to them?
Definitely, I would say LinkedIn. And the best way is to say, what you're interested in, and talk a bit more about yourself as well. I think that's very important.
Fantastic. So, Lucrèce, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Tom.
Hi. Just before you go, I'd really appreciate it if you could take the time to write a review of the Shiny New Object podcast on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, whatever it's called these days, or whichever podcast provider you use. We're an indie podcast, so it would go a long way for us if you could just share the word and give us a bit of a support on those channels. That would just be fantastic. If you haven't got time, that's also cool. And yeah, if you could tell your colleagues about the podcast, and also, if possible, don't forget to subscribe. And I'd love to hear your feedback. If you'd like to speak on the podcast or be a guest, or you think I'm asking the wrong questions, anything, I'd be super interested to hear what you think. So please email me at tom@automatedcreative.net. That's TOM at, I'm not going to bother spelling it. Anyway, you'll work it out. Thanks so much.